I'll be really honest with you. It's just the pain of the experience of living here through COVID and through breakups. Rob and I have lived in Flagstaff for 6 years. 5 of those years, you haven't seen Jack for what happened. It was
Welcome back to Behind TLC Sister Wives. So, the tea is scalding hot, and it's all about Kody Brown. Special Forces cast members finally speak out, and what they are revealing is absolutely jaw-dropping. We're talking brutal podcast confessions, shocking accusations, and a consensus that's so damning it's hard to believe. Multiple people who spent days living and competing alongside Kody are now calling him out in ways that will make your head spin. One cast member admitted she genuinely thought he was mentally slow. Another suspected he was on amphetamines because of his bizarre, almost superhuman behavior. And perhaps most devastatingly, nearly everyone agrees on one thing. Kody Brown was hands down the worst teammate on the entire show. This isn't just casual gossip or minor complaints. These are detailed, specific accounts from professional athletes, reality stars, and podcasters who had no idea who Kody was before filming began. At one point we get through a tunnel, and I had to turn around and kinda go back in, and I grabbed his hands, and Kody pulled me while I pulled Nick. That was crazy. They had no preconceived notions, no bias, no agenda. They simply showed up to compete on one of the toughest reality competitions on television, got paired with Kody Brown, and walked away absolutely stunned by what they experienced. The stories emerging from these podcast interviews are painting a picture so unflattering, so shocking that even longtime Sister Wives viewers who thought they'd seen everything are sitting up and taking notice. We're talking about a man who allegedly brought expired supplements to a grueling physical competition. A man who pushed his female teammate into a ditch, landed on top of her with his full body weight, and then just kept going without checking if she was injured. A man who abandoned his teammates in dark, claustrophobic tunnels and had to be stripped of his leadership position by production because he was that incompetent. A man who refused to eat for days because his food had pepper on it despite needing nutrition for intense physical challenges. A man whose behavior was so erratic, so self-centered, so completely divorced from basic teamwork that cast members are still processing it months later. Brianna Lee, Sean Johnson East, Robbie Patel, Randall Cobb, Eric Decker, Jesse James, and Andrew East have all shared their experiences. And the pattern is unmistakable. This wasn't just one person having a bad day or a personality clash. This was a systematic display of selfishness, obliviousness, and what some are calling downright bizarre behavior that left everyone scratching their heads. And then it was as we got to the water, that's when they're yelling at us to switch. They said, "Sean, you go in front. You're the leader now." So, they pushed Kody to second. The most damning part, these revelations are coming from people who pride themselves on being team players who push through extreme challenges with grace and encouragement for others. When athletes and competitors of that caliber are calling someone out, you know it's serious. The Kody Brown that showed up to Special Forces might have thought he was going to prove his masculinity and toughness to the world. Instead, he exposed himself in ways that validate everything Sister Wives viewers have been saying for years. And now, with podcast after podcast dropping bombshell after bombshell, there's no hiding from the truth anymore. Brianna Liga, better known as Chicken Fry, did not hold back when she got on her podcast to discuss Kody Brown. And honestly, her takedown was absolutely savage. Brianna hosts a podcast called Plan Bri Uncut, and after the Special Forces episode aired, where Kody laughed at her for being a podcaster, she decided it was time to set the record straight. The gloves came off, and what followed was one of the most brutal character assessments you'll ever hear. Here's the thing that makes Brianna's story so compelling. She had no idea who Kody Brown was before the show. She had never heard of Sister Wives, knew nothing about the polygamy, knew nothing about his treatment of wives and children. She walked into that competition completely blind. And her first impression of Kody was that he seemed mentally slow. She actually felt bad for him during filming. She really thought the man had some kind of cognitive issue or special needs. She said that he had zero social cues, seemed oblivious to everything happening around him, and just did things that led her to think that there was really something wrong with him. I remember Kody was, and that was the first time, thought he must be amphetamines because he was racing up and down that hill, and I was like, something's wrong, this guy just didn't matter. But then the show started airing, and Brianna learned who Kody really was. She learned his history, his treatment of women, his narcissistic behavior captured on television for over a decade. And that's when everything clicked into place for her. She realized he didn't have special needs at all. He was just, in her words, mentally messed up. It turned her sympathy into rage, and she let it all loose on her podcast. Brianna spoke about how Kody questioned her qualifications for being on the show, acting like podcasting was somehow less legitimate than being famous for being a polygamist. That moment of audacity wasn't lost on her. Here you have a man whose entire claim to fame was having multiple wives and treating them poorly. And he had the nerve to look down on her career. She pointed it out beautifully, asking how he made his money by berating women and being a narcissist on a television show. That's his qualification. Apparently, during the actual competition, Brianna was partnered with Kody constantly, and it was absolutely a nightmare. She has described having to mother him through challenges, even though he is 3 times her age. She had a full-on blowout fight with him during filming, telling him point-blank that he sucked, and they were not the same. The frustration was real, the anger was palpable, and she hoped the footage wouldn't even make it to air because of how brutal she got with him. What really makes Brianna's account so powerful is her honesty about how she misread things from the beginning. She thought she needed to be gentle with someone with limitations, only to find those weren't limitations at all. Those were character flaws, personality defects, and a lifetime of selfish behavior that calcified into who Kody Brown really is. And once she realized that, she had zero regrets on how she treated him. Ravi Patel brought his own shocking observations to the table. And what he revealed has people absolutely stunned. Ravi hopped on Gia Judica's podcast, Casual Chaos, and when they started talking about Kody Brown, things went wild. And he was like zipping by me almost like a cartoon, and I was like, something's wrong. This guy just did me. It was unlike anything I've ever seen. And he was like that throughout the competition. Ravi described a moment during one of the challenges that made him question everything he was seeing. They were running up and down a hill, and Ravi, who's in excellent physical shape, was pushing himself hard and feeling pretty confident about his performance. Then Kody Brown came zipping past him like some cartoon character, moving at speeds that seemed physically impossible for someone his age. Ravi's exact words were unforgettable. He said the first time he saw Kody racing past him, his immediate thought was that Kody must be on amphetamines or meth. That's not a casual observation. That is a trained actor and reasonably fit person watching someone in their late 50s blow past professional athletes and thinking something is seriously wrong with this picture. The way Kody moved wasn't just fast, it was unnatural. It defied logic. There were people decades younger than him, people who train regularly, people who are genuinely athletic, and yet Kody was leaving them in the dust. Descriptions of Kody's training regimen only added to the bizarre picture. Cast members revealed that Kody would work out for 3 to 4 hours a day. He wore a weighted vest constantly during training. His warm-up routine included doing handstands and walking around on his hands, which is not exactly standard preparation for most people. The level of intensity was wildly impressive for his age, sure, but it also raised eyebrows. How was this man, who allegedly lives on a specific blood type diet and is so particular about his food, managing to outperform people half his age? Ravi called Kody the most fascinating person in the entire cast, which says something considering the diverse group of competitors. He described Kody's personality as being like an honest 12-year-old boy, someone who was overly excited to be there and constantly giving everyone unsolicited advice about what needed to happen next. That childlike enthusiasm combined with his physical performance created a strange cocktail that nobody quite knew how to process. Multiple cast members echoed similar observations about Kody's speed and endurance. They watched him fly past them during challenges, seemingly tireless, while everyone else was struggling to keep pace. The altitude training explanation only goes so far. Yes, Kody trained in Flagstaff at high elevation, which can give you an edge when you come back down to lower elevations, but that advantage shouldn't be enough to make someone pushing 60 move like they're in their 20s and hopped up on something. The speculation about what Kody was taking became a running conversation among the cast. They couldn't figure out how else to explain what they were witnessing. And when you combine the superhuman physical performance with the expired supplements he brought, the strange behavior, and the erratic personality, the picture becomes even more confusing and concerning. The supplement situation is where things get truly bizarre. And honestly, it's so perfectly Kody Brown that you couldn't make it up if you tried. During one of the podcast interviews with Shawn Johnson East, Andrew East, and several Nashville-based cast members, the conversation turned to what people were allowed to bring onto the show. Contestants could pack personal items and necessary medications. And this is where Kody's true colors really started showing. Robbie Patel admitted on the podcast that he had worked the system to bring extra supplies. He claimed he had migraines, so he could pack a huge supply of Advil and pain medication. But here's the key difference. Robbie brought those supplies to share with everyone. He was essentially the team pharmacist, making sure his fellow competitors had access to pain relief and earplugs. He brought a 50-pack of earplugs and specifically to pass out among cast members. He lied to production about his medical needs so he could help other people. That's the mark of a team player, someone thinking about the collective good. Kody Brown took the exact opposite approach. When the conversation turned to who brought the most stuff, Randall Cobb immediately jumped in to clarify Kody brought the most, not Ravi. Kody, unlike Ravi, who was generous with his supplies, Kody shared absolutely nothing. Multiple cast members confirmed he did not share his drugs or supplements with anyone. He hoarded everything for himself, which tracks perfectly with everything we know about his selfish behavior. But wait, it gets worse. When cast members examined what Kody had brought, they discovered something wild. His supplements were expired, not just a few months past their expiration date, but 3 years expired. 3 entire years. Jesse James specifically called this out, saying, Kody came with something that was 3 years old and he refused to take it. Can you imagine training for a brutal physical competition and packing your carefully selected supplements and not even checking if they're still good? The cast identified that at least some of what Kody brought were caffeine supplements or hydration packs loaded with caffeine. So, here's this man racing around like he's on amphetamines, according to multiple witnesses, and he's taking expired caffeine pills. The irony is almost too much. Either the expired caffeine was still potent enough to give him that boost. Whatever the case, cast members kept circling back to the same observation. Kody was on something the whole time. The expired supplement situation reveals so much about who Kody is. This is a man who spends extravagant amounts on clothing, jewelry, cars, and art. He and Robin collect everything under the sun, filling their homes with stuff they don't need. But he couldn't be bothered to replace his expired supplements before going on national television for one of the most physically demanding competitions out there. It's the same pattern of misplaced priorities and self-absorption that Sister Wives viewers have watched for years, just playing out in a different setting. The tunnel challenge is where Kody's behavior went from questionable to absolutely unacceptable. And what happened to Shawn Johnson East is frankly shocking. Shawn is an Olympic gold medalist, a professional athlete who knows how to handle pressure and physical challenges. She's competed at the highest levels imaginable. And yet, her experience with Kody Brown in those tunnels left her genuinely traumatized and furious. Let's set the scene. The challenge involved crawling through tight, dark tunnels as a team. Shawn was partnered with Kody Brown and Nick Young, a 6 feet 7 inches basketball player. Right from the start, things went horribly wrong. Before they even entered the tunnels, contestants had to jump down into a ditch or gutter to begin the challenge. This is where Kody committed what can only be described as an assault. Even if unintentional, Shawn described the moment in vivid detail across multiple podcast appearances, and each time she added more context that made it worse. Kody didn't just accidentally bump into her. He pushed her down the hill into the gutter, and she landed flat on her face. Then, as if that wasn't bad enough, his entire body came crashing down on top of her, his full weight landing directly on this tiny Olympic gymnast who probably weighs a fraction of what he does. The impact was so severe that Shawn genuinely thought she had broken her arm. She thought she was injured badly enough that she might not be able to continue. And here's the part that really shows who Kody is as a person. He just kept going. He didn't stop to check if she was okay. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask if she needed medical attention. He pushed her down, landed on her, and then continued on with the challenge like nothing had happened. Shawn had to process the shock, assess whether she was actually injured, and then pull herself together to keep going, all while Kody had already moved ahead without a second thought. When Sean recounted the story, even she was trying to be nice about it initially. She kept saying it was an accident, that things were chaotic, that it all happened so fast. But as she told the story multiple times across different podcasts, you could hear the reality setting in. Accident or not, the fact that he didn't stop, didn't check on her, didn't acknowledge what had just happened, spoke volumes about his character. The other cast members who heard this story had immediate reactions. When Sean mentioned it in the group podcast with all the Nashville cast members, Eric Decker started laughing in recognition because he'd clearly witnessed Kody's problematic behavior, too. Randall Cobb threw in a simple classic, indicating this was absolutely typical Kody Brown behavior. These weren't people making excuses for him or trying to see both sides. They were validating exactly what Sean experienced and confirming it fit the pattern they'd all observed. But the tunnel disaster was only beginning. What happened after they actually entered those tunnels was somehow even worse. What happened inside those tunnels is quite, possibly one of the most damning revelations about Kody Brown's character. And here's why. Production actually had to intervene and strip him of his leadership role mid-challenge. Let that sit for a second. The Special Forces staff that ran these challenges consists of trained military personnel who watched Kody's behavior and decided he was so incompetent and dangerous that they couldn't let him continue leading his team. This wasn't edited for drama, this was a real safety decision made in real time. Sean Johnson described the tunnel system in detail, and it helps explain just how serious the situation was. There were actually 3 separate tunnel courses they had to complete, each one progressively more difficult than the last. They weren't the cute little tunnels with cracks of daylight that viewers saw on television. These were legitimate dark, claustrophobic spaces that triggered panic attacks and multiple competitors. Nick Young was having a full breakdown, trying to navigate the tight corners and oppressive darkness. During the first tunnel, Sean found herself sandwiched between Kody in front and Nick behind her. Nick started panicking almost immediately, struggling to get around the tight corners. And where was the team leader during all of this? Nowhere to be found. Sean was the one screaming encouragement to Nick, telling him it was okay, that she was there, that he could do it. She was essentially doing the emotional labor of leadership while Kody just plowed ahead, completely oblivious to his struggling teammates. At one point, the situation got so dire that Sean had to turn around and go headfirst back into the tunnel to physically grab Nick's hands and pull him through. And here's where it gets really telling. Kody finally helped by pulling Sean's feet while she pulled Nick. But this wasn't some coordinated team effort. This was Sean making an executive decision to rescue a panicking teammate while Kody had already left them both behind. When they emerged from the first tunnel, Kody was gone, completely gone. Sean came out, looked around, and her team leader was nowhere in sight. He had just kept running to the next challenge without checking on his team, without regrouping, without any acknowledgement that they were supposed to be working together. Sean's interpretation was simple and brutal. He forgot they were even in the tunnels. He was so focused on his own performance, his own time, his own individual achievement that his teammates simply didn't register in his mind. That's when production made the call. Before the second tunnel, the Special Forces staff stopped everything and reassigned roles. They told Sean she was now the leader and pushed Kody to second position. This is absolutely huge and somehow didn't make it into the televised show. The fact that trained military professionals watched Kody abandon his team and said, "Nope, this guy cannot be trusted with leadership," speaks volumes. They saw what everyone else saw. A selfish, incompetent man who was more interested in proving his individual toughness than actually being part of a team. The tunnel challenge wasn't an isolated incident. It was simply the most dramatic example of a pattern that played out throughout the entire competition. Sean Johnson said it best when describing Kody's behavior. Story of the season. Those 4 words encapsulate everything you need to know about how Kody Brown operated on Special Forces. Leaving people behind, forgetting about his teammates, prioritizing himself above everyone else wasn't a one-time mistake. It was his entire approach to every single challenge. Cast members noticed it immediately in other tasks, too. When teams had to carry heavy equipment or stretchers, there was a stark difference between how Kody led versus how other leaders operated. Most team leaders would carry equipment side by side with their partners, Or if they were front and back, they'd turn around and walk backwards so they could see their teammate and maintain communication. It's basic teamwork, basic consideration for the person you're working with, but not Kody Brown. When Kody was in front carrying a stretcher or equipment, he just grabbed it and plowed forward with zero regard for who was behind him. He never turned around, never checked in, never adjusted his pace. The people behind him would be struggling, saying they couldn't keep up. And in Kody's twisted mind, that probably felt like validation. He likely thought the Special Forces staff would look at him and think, wow, look how strong and capable he is. Those women just can't match his pace. The reality that everyone else could see. This guy has no concept of teamwork. This guy cannot function as part of a unit. This guy is so self-absorbed that he literally cannot process the needs of people around him. The Special Forces staff weren't impressed by his individual performance. They were concerned about his complete inability to work with others. That's why they stripped him of leadership. That's why cast members universally describe him as the worst teammate. Ravi Patel nailed it when he described Kody's personality as an earnest, 12-year-old boy who's constantly observing what's happening and narrating it out loud while also trying to give everyone motivational speeches. Nobody asked for the speeches. Nobody wanted the unsolicited advice. What they needed was an actual partner who could read the room, assess the situation, and adjust accordingly. Instead, they got someone living in his own reality where he's the hero of every story and everyone else is just supporting cast. Multiple cast members used the word eccentric to describe him, which is honestly generous. Eccentric suggests quirky but harmless. What Kody displayed was something more troubling, a fundamental inability to see other people as real individuals with their own needs and struggles. Everything filtered through the lens of how it affected him, how it made him look, how it served his narrative. The question Sean posed was devastating in its simplicity. If they had done a challenge asking who would have your back, who would run into a burning building for you, Kody Brown would be the last person anyone picked. And conversely, if they asked who wouldn't have your back, his name would be first on everyone's list. The Pepper situation might seem minor compared to abandoning teammates in tunnels, but it's actually incredibly revealing about Kody's stubborn, controlling nature, and it's a pattern that Sister Wives viewers recognized immediately because we've seen this exact behavior play out before. Let's take it back to season 1 of Sister Wives, the very first breakfast that Robin Brown ever made for Kody. She prepared eggs and, like any normal person, seasoned them with salt and pepper. Kody's response, he refused to eat them. Not a polite thank you, but could you leave the pepper off next time? Not even a willingness to eat it once and request changes going forward. Just a flat refusal because the food had pepper on it. Fast forward to Special Forces, where contestants are doing grueling physical challenges all day long, burning thousands of calories and desperately needing proper nutrition to keep their bodies functioning. The food provided wasn't gourmet by any means, but it was fuel. It was what everyone had access to, and most people were grateful for anything that would help them maintain their strength and energy. But not Kody Brown. Multiple cast members reported that at every single meal, Kody would complain that he couldn't eat the food because it had pepper on it. Every meal, not just once or twice. Every single time they sat down to eat, Kody was announcing he couldn't consume what was served. Sean Johnson specifically called out that he hadn't eaten a single thing in 4 days because everything had pepper on it. 4 days of intense physical competition, and this man was refusing to eat because of a seasoning preference. Let's be clear about something. Kody doesn't have a pepper allergy. If he had a serious medical condition, production would have accommodated him. They wouldn't serve him the same thing over and over again if it would eventually give him an allergic reaction. This was purely a preference. It was a stubborn refusal to adapt to circumstances that everyone else was dealing with just fine. This is the same controlling behavior he's exhibited for years with food, the same rigidity where he's lectured his wives about what they should eat based on his blood type diet theories. The irony of Kody being so finicky about pepper but bringing 3-year expired supplements, well, isn't lost on anyone. He won't eat fresh food because there's some seasoning that he doesn't like, but he'll pop caffeine pills that expire during the pandemic. There is no logic to that. This is all about control and being difficult for the sake of being difficult. What this really is is quite indicative of Kody's complete inability to be flexible or think beyond his own immediate desires. Everyone else on that show was making sacrifices, pushing through discomfort, adapting to less than ideal circumstances. That's literally what the competition calls for. But Kody couldn't even manage the basic task of eating food with pepper on it to maintain his strength. He'd rather go hungry for days than compromise on something so trivial. Same man who couldn't compromise with his wives, who couldn't adapt his expectations, who couldn't see beyond his own needs and wants. The pepper situation is Kody Brown in miniature, stubborn, inflexible, and utterly self-centered. Let's take a moment to really process the number of people who had some serious problems with Kody Brown this competition. This wasn't one person having a personality clash or a bad day. This was a systematic pattern recognized by nearly everyone who spent significant time around him. And what makes it so powerful is this: these weren't people who knew his history. They weren't Sister Wives fans coming in with preconceived notions. These were complete strangers meeting Kody for the first time, and they all walked away with the same assessment. Brianna thought he was mentally slow at first, then realized he was just mentally messed up. She had a full blowout fight with him and admitted she wanted to unleash even more after learning about his treatment of women. Sean Johnson East was literally injured by him, abandoned by him in the tunnels, and had to take over his leadership position because he was that incompetent. Andrew East was clearly upset on his wife's behalf and used Kody's failures to illustrate what actual good leadership looks like. Ravi Patel, despite trying to be diplomatic, admitted Kody rubbed multiple people the wrong way and wasn't a team player. Randall Cobb validated everything with simple one-word responses like classic when hearing about Kody's behavior. Eric Decker laughed in recognition when Sean described being left behind, clearly having witnessed similar incidents himself. Jesse James pointed out that Kody didn't share his supplies with anyone. Unlike other cast members who helped each other out, even Nick Young, who was struggling through his own challenges, recognized that Kody wasn't there for the team. The consensus was absolutely unanimous among those who spoke publicly. Nobody defended him. Nobody made excuses. Nobody said, "Well, you have to understand his perspective," or "he was actually really helpful in other ways." The silence of any positive comments speaks volumes. When professional athletes, reality stars, and podcasters from completely different backgrounds all come to the same conclusion about someone, you have to pay attention. What's particularly striking is how these observations align perfectly with everything Sister Wives viewers have been saying for years. The selfishness, the inability to think of others, the rigidity, the need to be the center of attention, the complete lack of self-awareness. Kody thought going on Special Forces would prove his masculinity and toughness to a new audience. Instead, he gave a whole new group of people a front-row seat to his worst qualities. These cast members had no reason to lie or exaggerate. Most of them have their own successful careers and public profiles. They're not trying to ride Kody's coattails or create drama for attention. They're just sharing their real experiences from a tough competition, and those experiences just so happen to paint an incredibly unflattering picture. When Sean said story of the season about Kody leaving her behind, she wasn't being dramatic. She was stating a fact that everyone recognized. The validation these podcasts provide to longtime Sister Wives viewers can't be overstated. 4 years, fans have watched Kody mistreat his family while he insisted he was a good man, a good father, a good husband who was simply misunderstood. Now, we've finally arrived at the beautiful, ironic truth of Kody Brown's Special Forces disaster. This man spent years crafting a narrative about himself as the strong patriarch, the capable leader, the tough guy who could handle anything thrown at him. He talked endlessly about proving his masculinity, about showing the world what real strength looks like. He genuinely believed that going on Special Forces would validate everything he'd been saying about himself for years. Instead, he accomplished the exact opposite. He exposed himself as selfish, incompetent, and fundamentally incapable of functioning as part of a team. The most powerful part of all these podcast revelations is that they come from people who had absolutely no knowledge of Sister Wives or Kody's history. They weren't influenced by Christine's accounts of his neglect or Janelle's descriptions of his favoritism or Mary's stories about his emotional abuse. They simply spent days competing alongside him and independently came to all the same conclusions that his family members had reached over decades. That's not a coincidence. That's confirmation. Everything Sister Wives viewers have been saying for years about Kody being all about himself, unable to think of others, completely self-absorbed, and lacking any real leadership skills has been validated by total strangers. These independent observers watched him in high-pressure situations and saw exactly what his wives and children lived with every single day. The tunnel incident where he forgot his teammates were even there. That's Kody forgetting he has kids in other households. The not sharing of supplies. That's Kody not providing for his families evenly. The inability to be a team player. That's Kody destroying his plural marriage because he couldn't function as part of a family unit. Here's the thing that makes this entire situation so perfectly fitting. Kody went on special forces specifically to prove something. Even in interviews after the show, when he was noticeably thinner from the experience, he was still talking about proving himself as a man. He learned absolutely nothing. The death of his son didn't change him. The loss of 3 wives didn't change him. A life-altering competition experience where he was stripped of leadership and called out by multiple cast members didn't change him. That's how deep his dysfunction runs. The universe has a funny way of giving people exactly what they need, even if it's not what they want. Kody wanted validation and got exposure. He wanted to prove his strength and revealed his weakness. He wanted to show the world he was a capable leader and instead demonstrated he can't even be a decent teammate. Every single thing he hoped to accomplish backfired spectacularly, and now there's a permanent record of professional athletes and reality competitors explaining in detail why Kody Brown was the worst person to work with. So, what do you think of all these revelations? You think Kody has any idea how badly he came across? Or is he still living in his reality where he was the star of the show? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already and stay tuned because the next video is waiting and you absolutely won't believe what's coming next is going to astonish you. So do subscribe for the next twisted video.